Hello and welcome to the Allison Supply Chains podcast. This is the December 2025 episode covering the latest news concerning third-party security posture management and digital supply chain risk. Each month, we pick a few of the industry's most interesting stories and discuss them. If you like what you hear or prefer to read over listening, you can also find these stories in print form. You can join 15,377 other subscribers and read the Allison Supply Chains newsletter every month. To do that, you can go to tenchysecurity.com, click on Insights and News, and then Allison Supply Chains newsletter. It'll take you right there. Also, if you're listening to this, why not subscribe? You're already here. You can just click the button. Go ahead and do it. All right, let's get this show started. This is the last show of the year. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, founder of the Defenders Initiative, and joining me is Alexandre Sieira, looking very festive. How are you doing, Alexandre?
Oh, ho, ho. How are you? Yes, indeed. My wife loves and my daughter love putting up the Christmas tree. I have no stake in this whatsoever. Like none of this is, I cannot take credit for any of this, and it looks awesome. So I wanted to, get in the holiday spirit and wish everyone proactively a Merry Christmas, a Happy Holidays, whatever you celebrate this time of year. Hope everyone has a wonderful time with their families and get some rest.
Feliz Natal? Is that how you say it?
Feliz Natal, Feliz Navidad for Spanish speakers. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we are getting into it also. My partner's kids and their dogs just made it up here yesterday. So we're in full holiday mode up here. We've got more people that are going to be joining us as the month goes on. So we're going to have a full house this Christmas, and I'm excited to cook for everybody, and we're going to have a lot of fun.
Nice.
All right. So this also celebrates the end of our first year doing this podcast.
Yay!
And we made it.
I guess.
And to yeah. Yeah. And to celebrate that, we're going to go through all the depressing stories that we covered this year. So I actually built out a spreadsheet. I wanted to see if there are any clear trends going back through this whole year, talking about supply chain attacks and third-party risk management stories. And I came up with a few things. So the theme of balkanization, EU is unhappy with the U.S. Folks outside the U.S. are trying to de-risk hyperscalers, U.S.-based hyperscalers, because outside of China, those are really the only hyperscalers, I think, right? And that hasn't changed. Russia's talking about cutting itself off from the entire rest of the internet. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on. In addition to that, attackers seem to be targeting supply chain more and more and more. They seem to realize, at least this is just my feeling from just the trends that we've been seeing. I assume that they see the benefit in attacking one company that gives them access to 1,000, right? That there's a clear benefit there. So maybe it's just me reading into it and it's coincidence, but I really don't think it's coincidence.
It's not. We've been seeing larger and larger campaigns affecting hundreds and hundreds of companies. That just recently the Salesforce-oriented campaigns with the latest one is Gainsight, right? Where they're founding, again, another company that has a lot of OAuth tokens into a single kind of platform, but then going after that platform's customers. It's a force multiplier for attackers. And we have an article about that. It's always been true. It's just accelerating. Because a lot of those technologies are getting more widely adopted. And people should wake up to it. Absolutely.
Another trend that we've seen is attackers aren't having a whole lot of trouble getting in. There's still some really foundational stuff. The stuff that your SOC 2 says that you do, that's not getting done. Or stuff that's not really in the standards, like telling the help desk not to give away passwords to just anybody who calls up. So we've had several cases where the help desk is outsourced. Whoever resets passwords, helps employees with their accounts, was a third party, and that third party had no qualms in just giving the attackers everything that they asked for. there was the Clorox breach that happened, and then there were all the
Coinbase
breaches in the.
is a big one as well.
Yeah, what
Coinbase.
was the? It's still early in the morning for me, so my brain isn't fully woken up. But
Coinbase
what
had
was
a
the
call center in India.
scattered spider?
Oh,
Yeah, that
okay.
was kind
The
of
threat actor, yes.
yeah, scattered spiders
Spiders,
mo.
spider hunters, shiny hunters,
Shiny.
something. Yeah. Shiny spider, scattered hunters, something. Yes.
Yeah, not sure what's going on with the rebranding there. At one point, we covered a story where they said that they were done, that they had accomplished all their goals, and they were going away. But then it seemed like they were back the next month. So, who knows?
I'm shocked.
The and in addition, the bar for third party security seems pretty low. Again, we get some glimpse. So actually, my RSA talk was accepted, and the focus of it is on
Yay.
the importance of breach transparency, and yours was accepted as well. So congratulations to you as well.
Yay. My first time, actually. I mean, you've spoken there a couple of times. I've done Black Hat before, but this is my first RxA submission. That's awesome. That was accepted,
Yeah. Tell
actually,
us a
not the
little bit
first submission.
about who you're speaking with and what you're talking about.
So, actually, friend of the show, Mr. Alex Pinto, who's at Director of Threat Intelligence Associate Director of Threat Intelligence at Verizon, as opposed to me, who is Associate Director of Natural Stupidity here at Tenchi Security, apparently. But so he was here because he handles the DBIR at Verizon, and we actually
Yeah,
had a
there's a better
special
title for him.
episode.
He is the father of the DBIR. He is
Right?
DBIR
It
daddy.
could not be in safer hands. Alex is amazing, one of the smartest people I know. And we're going to be talking about doing a data-driven analysis of the association between pricing and UX choices by cloud providers and security outcomes. So does the fact that AWS have a very cryptic syntax for IAM lead to more security misconfigurations, relatively speaking, than maybe some of their competitors that maybe done a better job because they have the benefit of hindsight, like they came after AWS, right? And weirdly enough, and I did not have this on the cards for my entire life, not just 2026, we might actually say good things about Oracle. So stay tuned, go
Oh
watch the
wow,
talk. Yes, yeah, we're going to that extreme, right? So that's
that's the
interesting.
hook right there. You have me interested now. I didn't expect that either, but we're gonna say good things about Oracle was the hook that got me. I will have to check that out. And then finally, the last note that I made was that current practices on TPCRM just don't seem to be working. We had JP Morgan call this out. We've had insurance providers call this out. I think it's clear to people that simply questionnaires and things like that, these outside in scans that both the insurance companies do and some separate private companies do are not really preparing us for these incidents at all, or really doing anything to de-risk them for folks that are trying to do their due diligence when joining up with a third party. So I think it's clear to everybody. I think if you were to ask anybody, they say, "Well, yeah, of course," but what else is there, right? Like I think the path forward. The problem is clear. The path forward is not for a lot of people.
I have a few ideas. We've discussed them on the podcast before, and we're probably going to get into them during the discussions today. But yeah, actually, on that, two things to comment. We have during last month when we had the Tenchi conference, we did our annual TPCRM survey about what methodologies people are using, what outcomes they're achieving, how much budget
Mm-hmm.
they're allocating. We're going to publish that maybe later this month or early in January. And it's probably something we're going to be covering here, but there will be, like we did last year, we're going to publish all the figures and the analysis we did on the survey data. And it's as bleak as the years before. It confirms what you're saying. And to me, my heart goes out to the hardworking people that work in TPCRM, the GRC folks out there, that it's so frustrating to see smart people, hardworking people admit to you, yeah, a lot of the work I do does not improve security outcomes, or is overruled by the business that decides to go with a very risky vendor regardless because of market conditions, because of better price or whatever it is. And I just feel for those people that are trying to do their best and do a good job, but the process they have to work on, they operate under, and the incentives for the company, the culture of the company, leads us to that scenario where what we're doing is not working. And actually, this is Tenchi's mission, to try to help them fix that in a way.
Yeah,
Anyway,
and if you're to dig into like why a lot of people in cybersecurity do what they do, you'll find a lot of people are mission oriented. So if they don't feel like they're having any kind of impact, they're going to start phoning it in. They're going to start looking for a new job. You need this to retain talent in this industry. You need to connect
yes.
what these people are doing, to positive outcomes. They need to at least feel like what they're doing matters. Most of them, I think.
Yeah, agreed. And that's what makes me sad, not seeing a lot of that.
All right, so let's actually heavily tied to that. Let's jump into our first story: the risks of ignoring corporate culture in third-party due diligence. Really, what we're talking about, do the employees care? They're going to be having access to your data, maybe access to your systems, depending on what that third party is doing for you, maybe handling your goods, working with your customers directly. What is that corporate culture like? So I thought this was a really interesting one because it's really focused on TPRM, not just the cyber component of this, but of course it applies to the cyber component as well. I think I'd like to hear your perspective on this. How you look at this.
It's a challenging thing, right? And the more I think about it, the more challenging it is. Because absolutely, one of the things that's going to make the most impact, like if you could actually measure how much security is ingrained in a company's culture, I think this would be a super strong predictor of what their actual security posture is, right? You can have companies with very small budgets, with very small teams, but if everyone is actually concerned about this, it's one of the things I worry about the most, being the CTO, but also the CISO of a smallish startup. We're 68 people the last time I checked. Um, but I make damn sure that every single developer understands the importance for us of having proper security when they're doing code. Not every company is able to do that. We're a small company, we have a tight-knit culture, and a lot of other startups are not led by security people like Tenchi is, even sometimes when they are developing
Yeah.
security products. So, but how do you even measure that? It's hard enough trying to measure your own company security culture, right? And we see a lot of people using the phishing simulations platforms to try to measure security awareness, for example, like how aware your average employee is about phishing, for example, and all the controversy and drama and brouhaha around that, which is to me justified. A lot of studies show it's not actually very effective, the training and the phishing simulations. And if it's badly conducted, can actually lead to demoralizing employees
Worse.
and finger pointing. And it's not even what you want, because it's even antagonize the general employee population against the security teams. I have a cat that's trying to jump into the laptop here. That's not good. Sorry.
I've got dogs running around my feet as well. So
Yeah, come here. You want to appear on the podcast? You're going to appear on the podcast. Okay, this is Cookie. You wanted to step into the podcast. Say hi, Cookie. There you go. You've got your minutes of fame. Okay, so if you're not watching this on YouTube, you're missing out. Cute cat. So how do you do that? And then something hit me when I was thinking about this, that actually, when you do an assessment that involves like an audit, and that includes interviews with the security team at your third party, we might not know this, and we might not do that explicitly. We might not have like a check or a measure. But one of the things that's happening is that TPCRM analyst talking to those people is going to infer how knowledgeable they are, how much they actually understand what they're talking about, which you don't get from a questionnaire, let alone an AI agent answering a questionnaire. And actually, that might be one of the irreplaceable things you get with the traditional audit into PCRM, because you can get that subjective measure of, when I'm talking to people, do these people actually like immediately talk authoritatively about those issues as if they're actually involved in the day-to-day of the security? Or is this something, hey, I have to look it up, it's in the document here? Do they know what the terms of art mean? Do they misuse terminology? Do they have things on the tip of their tongue? That's going to show you how involved they are with security, how capable they are. And maybe we should make that assessment explicit if we are doing interviews, if we are doing assessments. It's a subjective assessment based on the interviewer, but that's maybe one way of doing that.
And that's something you can be trained on. There's an XBI agent who does training classes and put out a. I remember reading his book years ago. What every body is saying, and it's all about body language and things that you can infer from interviewing somebody. And you don't need to train for giving like a lie detector test or anything like that, but. But yeah, there are things you can set up your questions specifically to invoke a response, or you could have whatever they're filling out, whatever that analyst is filling out, set up to ask the right questions, so that they know to look for these things. How long did it take them to answer? Did they have to go look it up? You can put down some specific questions so that they anticipate trying to get this read from them. Do they even know who in their organization is responsible for these things? You can get a sense for what level of disconnect and communication there is in the organization. Are they aware of whether or not they have an incident response policy or not, or an incident response team? Yeah. So
I was actually having an internal Slack discussion about a very large fintech that is going to raise like multiples, hundreds, like hundreds of millions of dollars in funding that provides critical services to a lot of large banks. They haven't had a CISO for over 1.5 years. Like that would be a signal. Like, do you who are the security executives? How experienced are they? Do they match the level of criticality and the level of regulation your company is under? Or if you have an open position, how long has it been open for? Because that's a signal of maybe the company is not willing to pay enough to attract the right talent, or maybe when the right talent goes to interview, they find something wrong with the company, they want nothing to do with it. So, but those are subtle cues, like that you won't get like a screenshot as evidence. It's not a technical control, but it's something we maybe should include as part of the assessment, right? The other thing that I thought about, and that's going to be a little bit controversial, and I don't want to throw anyone under the bus here because I really respect the compliance automation companies like Vanta and Drata, and there's so many these days. But one of the things that come to mind is you're going to remember a good friend, Fernando Montenegro. He wrote an amazing article a while back about economic incentives in the HR market, and he brings up the concept of signals and filters, right? You have buyers and sellers of something, and they don't exactly understand. Like there's information asymmetry. You don't know exactly what you're buying on a commodity. You have sellers trying to provide signals. Like if you're a person trying to sell yourself, like in the HR market, you're going to, hey, I graduated at this top university. I have this certification. I took the scores, whatever, as signals of your competence. And then HR, like the buyer, can use that as filters. Oh, I'm only going to hire people that graduated from a top university. I'm only going to hire someone that has at least this much experience, right? And SOC 2, back in the day, used to be a great filter because very few companies, only the companies that were really invested in at least showing that they had proper security, would pay to go for this exercise. They would hire the top auditors, like a big four, and they put in the effort of showing that they have proper security. So it used to be a good signal, and companies could use that as a filter. As the compliance automation companies made SOC 2s more ubiquitous and attracted a lot lower level auditors and even just people that are just rubber stamping companies regardless of their actual security posture. And everyone gets a SOC 2. You
Yeah.
get a SOC 2, you get a SOC 2, you
I'm
get a SOC 2, everyone gets a SOC
I'm in a
2.
lot of groups. I'm in a lot of groups with CISOs, and the only thing that I hear them talk about when it comes to SOC 2s is how quickly they got it and how, with how much effort they got it. Right? It's a box to check. It's something that needs to get done to help enable the sales team, and I don't think a lot of people are trying to improve security through that process.
And you know what? The compliance automation companies, and I think Ross Halaluyak, actually also our friend Ross Halaluyak, author of the amazing book Cyber for Builders, which, by the way, if you're in any way related to security startups, you should read. You probably have your copy there. I have it in my home office, not here where I have the Christmas tree, where I'm at right now. I would pick up my copy as well. He mentions how intelligent the compliance automations, like he talks about Vanta specifically, their go-to-market is genius because they were one of the few companies that were able to tie security to sales. So they're selling to salespeople. They're saying, "Hey, I'm going to help you get a SOC 2, and because you have SOC 2s, you're closing more deals with your customers because the customers are going to have this signal that you have proper security." Problem is, their success is undermining the value prop because the easier they make it for companies to get SOC 2s, the more they incentivize this market of rubber stamping uh, um, auditors. Because we had this conversation with AJ Yon. There's an entire episode about SOC 2s that people should go back and watch again if you haven't. About this, that there are companies, I'm not talking about any of them specifically now. It was AJ saying that. I'm not aware of which companies are doing that, but some are saying, we're guaranteeing you pay me the 10K per year or 15K per year. That it already includes the price of the audit to generate the report, and you're guaranteed to get a clean SOC 2, right?
Yeah.
So they are undermining the value prop because the more they do that, they get on the short term, they get more revenue. But in the long term, the value of the SOC 2 drops. It's already like at rock bottom, in my personal opinion, which means fewer people have a reason to buy their product. So it's like a snake eating itself, and they're undermining their own value prop.
So I think there is a way to save it, though, in that if you have a SOC 2 and your SOC 2 says you're doing certain things and you get breached, and your insurance company uses that SOC 2 to say, "Hey, you said you were doing all these things. We did the breach investigation. Clearly, you weren't. Yet you get no payment from your insurance company." The insurance company could end up being the enforcer here. And I mean, they have their own questionnaires, they have their own requirements, but I can't imagine why they wouldn't use your SOC 2 against you if you weren't actually doing what you said you were doing in that SOC 2.
Funnily enough, the insurance companies I talk to don't use the SOC 2s. They prefer to do their own underwriting themselves and conduct the process themselves. We actually have a story about this. Let's save it for that story. There, we're going to be repeating ourselves.
Okay. So one of the other interesting things I think from this story, which is by Bev Shah, who's the founder and chief executive of City Hive. I'm not sure what City Hive is, but she appears to be based in the UK because there's an implication that the Financial Conduct Authority, which is federal UK organization, is starting to care about this. Feels like in your governance framework, if you're not looking at company culture, you're leaving a blind spot there. That there's additional work that you should be doing.
Yeah, regulators, and she talks about fraud, and she talks about aggressive sales practices, because this is unethical practices, because this is about TPRM and not just TPCRM. So absolutely, like if you're outsourcing, if you're a financial institution that are regulated and you yourself don't use unethical or illegal sales tactics, but you outsource sales to a company that does do that, what she's saying is you're going to be liable anyway. Sounds vaguely familiar, right? Like you outsource an activity, but you don't outsource the risk. I can remember a couple of old guys talking about that a few times in this podcast. Anyway.
Yeah. And one great quote, the bottom line at the end of this article: if your due diligence focuses solely on financials and compliance checklists, you're managing half the risk.
Yep.
All right. And moving
Absolutely.
on to story number 2, CISOs are losing control of their security outcomes. And this is, it's very strongly worded, this piece. I think I've got a quote here somewhere. Let's see.
The second bullet. I increased
It's,
the size of your quote when we added to the show notes. I'm sorry about that. I just want to say while you find it, is that this is probably the best article I read this year. It
mhm.
was a gut punch and it verbalized a lot of things that I wanted to have said, and they say it very well. They play a little fast and loose with a few numbers there in the middle, but if you
Mhm.
get past that, it's incredibly eye-opening. You should be sending this to your CISO friends. And this is a rare example of someone that works at a vendor producing an article that is very little biased to what their vendor produces and actually containing a lot of truth. It was very well thought out. Kudos to Daniel Mission. I don't know how to pronounce your name. I apologize, from Cybersecurity HQ, because this is incredible. Read this. Stop and read this entire article. Anyway, go ahead.
Uh, yeah. So the quote was, "Your third-party risk program is theater." So yeah,
I
gut
would love
punches,
to disagree, but I'm unable to.
and
Right?
it's I don't like a lot of the language in this. I think it creates a bit of a barrier that doesn't need to be there. Breaks down interdependence collapse into identity cascade failure, integration trust inheritance, governance asymmetry. It's just there's too much work you have to do to figure out what he's saying here. But he saves it in giving a bunch of really good examples and explaining each of them. So as soon as you scroll down to the examples for each of these things that I just rattled off, it instantly makes sense because he describes it in more plain language, gives a breach that's an example of this failure, and yeah, fully agree. This is something everybody should be reading. It's backed up with examples and facts, and don't let the language don't skip it because of the language.
And here's the sentence I like the most, because I feel like security teams need to be like shaken out of their stupor and really absorb this. The fundamental operating assumption of enterprise security, that you control your security outcomes by controlling your assets, is now false. Most, probably over 50% of your material security incidents are happening outside of your on-prem or your direct controlled infrastructure. It's happening at a third party. It's happening at a SaaS vendor. It's happening at a
Mm-hmm.
services provider, and then impacting your processes and your data, right? It goes on to further say in 2025, third party involvement in breaches doubled to 30%. That's at the BIR quote. Again, we had a special episode with our good friend Alex Pinto just before RSA this year. Go back and read it. We talk about this. This is not a trend. It's a structural inversion. The breach no longer starts inside your perimeter. It starts inside your vendor's vendor, domain where you hold full accountability and zero authority. Again, I disagree on the zero authority. Yes, you have full accountability. People don't internalize this, right? But you don't have zero authority. And the reason why you don't is because TPCRM exists, right? You make a purchasing decision and you can influence and you can dictate the criteria for those vendors to work and who they pick as vendors as part of those criteria. So you don't have zero authority. You have much less authority than you have on your own infrastructure. Absolutely, like orders of magnitude less authority, but it's not zero. So that's, even though this is a great article, again, he's going for impact here, which I understand, but it's not super accurate. Anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so the TLDR here is with so much outsourced. You're not just you're not outsourcing that risk. You're just outsourcing those workloads. But as we've seen, one of the key trends this year A breach to a third party, like a lot of people out there can't name the Salesforce integrations or third parties. They just remember Salesforce, right? Uh, when we talk about a lot of these breaches where a third party was a component, it's maybe TCS is an outlier because it was the common denominator for so many breaches. But most of these, you don't remember the third party, or even if you do remember the third party, I think everyone agrees it was still, the primary company, the first party's responsibility and their failure to trust that third party.
Yeah, and I think we are starting to see this now, like these statistics that I typically throw around, like already last year, 2024, the World Economic Forum on a survey with their members said that like 41% of breaches or material impact started at a third party and indirectly impacted the companies they surveyed. The DBIR says that between 2023 2024, like we doubled the amount of breaches involving third parties. And this has continued to grow into 2025, and in part because we are outsourcing more, whether we realize it or not. Cloud makes data sharing a lot easier. We're increasingly using SaaS, sometimes for good reasons, because again, it brings productivity gains, cost reductions, et cetera. There are valid business reasons to moving to cloud and SaaS, right? Um, but they're much easier to adopt than legacy alternatives, than on-prem alternatives, and running software in your own infrastructure. But that means we're increasingly running our critical processes and storing our sensitive data at other companies. The percentage of critical processes that now depend on third parties, if we ever had a graph plotting that, or the amount of data that is shared outside of your own infrastructure, is at an all-time high, and that percentage continues to grow. Whereas before, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, sharing that much, outsourcing that much would have been operationally untenable or economically inviable. And it's so much easier now that people are just doing more of it and reaping the benefits, right?
Yeah.
But therein lies what I feel, and again, I'm a sucker for economic incentives issues, right? Because I feel that explains so much around cybersecurity, is what's known as the principal agent problem. Sometimes the incentives are misaligned between the main entity and who's representing them. In this case, I feel there's a mismatch between the incentives of the company executives work for and the executives themselves, right? That work for those companies, both business executives and sometimes security executives as well. So let me give you, for example, CISOs are naturally more focused on spending budget and time and allocating personnel to handle the security things that they control and are held more directly accountable for. If you have the same breach that leads to the same losses, if it was a breach involving that company's own infrastructure versus the same losses, the same data leaked, the same everything, but it happened on a vendor, it's psychologically much easier. It was the vendor's fault. Like on our thing, we did our job here on the things we do control. So it's much easier to excuse, to not feel responsible for, and the governance of most companies will not have the equal consequences for the same executives when this happens. And that goes for business teams as well, right? Sometimes business teams are outsourcing things because it's going to be faster and cheaper if I do it with a third party. Maybe, just maybe, it's faster and cheaper because those people are cutting corners, not on purpose, not because they're bad people, but because if you're a large bank, there are controls that make things slower and more expensive, but those controls exist for a reason, to
Right.
comply with regulations, to manage security risk or even other kinds of risks. And there's no free lunch. If that vendor is cheaper than doing it internally, maybe it's because the thing they don't do and that don't cost them that time and money are things that you do need to properly manage the risk at your company. Maybe they're just more efficient, right? That's also an option. They have bigger economies of scale. That can happen. But what proportion? Are people even thinking about this? And then the executive is thinking, this is going to be great for my career. I generated cost savings. I launched the product sooner. I'm going
Yeah.
to meet my goals, right? And I'm going to be promoted. And if that generates a little bit more risk for the company, that's okay, right? Because I'm concerned about my career and not necessarily what's best for the company. Again, not because people are evil and they're doing that on purpose necessarily. It's because they're driven by their incentives. And naturally, that's the incentives we're going to have. So
Yeah.
anyway, I don't know if you've
Yeah.
ever
There
thought
was,
about it in that angle. Yeah.
yeah, outcomes of a survey. I can't remember if we talked about it on here or if I talked about it on Enterprise Security Weekly. But there was a survey done that basically showed that CISOs make the choices that help their career, and don't get them fired. Right? It said it in more tactful language, but basically, yeah, that those are the incentives that we have, right? These organizations are giving their employees. That's why the banks have to have those regulations. That's why in the U.S. the OCC is kind of ruthless and feared if you work in the banking industry, because unlike some of these other things like a SOC 2 or PCI, you don't choose the auditor, right? You don't know what you're going to get, so you really have to prepare for those kinds of audits, because there is no incentive for that auditor to be nice to you.
And the article mentions this is a governance problem, not a security problem. And the way I interpreted this, and I agree, but because I interpret it in the following way. This problem that we discussed is a problem of governance. This lack of alignment between the executive and the interest of the executive and the interest of the company is by definition a governance problem. And it's up to the board to make sure they create the financial and the corporate and the org chart, all the incentives to align the executives and the employees' incentives as much as they can with the company's interests, right? And I'm going to provide a positive example. Do you remember Qantas, the airline, where they had a major breach, and then the board said, none of the executives got a bonus this year. This is all your collective
Yeah,
fault. Like,
that's right.
that's the way you're running this company. You need to do better. That's amazing, because the CEO, like the CISO, when they report to the CEO and not to the CIO, right, is setting the budgets for security and saying, no, we're not going to invest in that. We'd rather spend in marketing. And he might be 100% correct, but he has to
And
be
ensuring that
held
they have good
accountable.
security leadership in the first place.
Having the
Yeah,
budget to even hire a good CISO that's going to advise
right.
him and the board, right? So it's up to the board to provide those and make not just the CISO accountable. Because here's the question: I have had the privilege of being asked to talk about third-party cyber risk management with a few boards here in Brazil, of large financial institutions, of independent board members that have like informal groups, and this is the thing I ask them. We've often seen CISOs be fired after a security incident. But when there's an incident involving a third party where the security team raised concerns and the business team overruled them, have you ever seen a business executive be fired over a breach? Because they should. Have you seen a CEO lose bonus because they had blocked a budget request from the CISO to handle that exact problem that
Right.
was exploited in that incident? Or
Yeah.
a CEO get fired if the company gets multiple breaches? Like, I mean, the Target CEO back in the day was replaced after that major breach. But those examples are still too far and few, between, that I feel like boards need to be more aware of this. And if you're a CISO, they can try to influence them in a way to do that. Like, you yourself should be aware this is going to be less and less the case, that you're not going to be held responsible for a breach if it started at a third party. Have to get involved. The regulators, as you said, are getting wise to this. And if you're a board member, thank you for listening, first of all. And secondly, that's the thing you should be concerned about.
This episode is brought to you by Zanshin, the innovative SaaS solution for third-party cyber risk management that's disrupting the market with a cooperative, continuous, and comprehensive approach. Zanshin is the first product to allow first parties to gain true visibility into their third parties in a non-intrusive way. Gain a deep understanding of how secure your third parties are in key areas like cloud security, endpoint security, identity and access management, and at-risk encryption. Visit Tenchi at tenchisecurity.com to schedule a demo or free trial and see for yourself how enterprise customers are able to reduce third-party risk by 80% or more in just a few weeks. All right, jumping over to story number 3 here. This one's about cyber insurance, and it's an interesting topic because I am consistently confused by the signals I hear from this market. I hear policyholders talking about how what they're paying is doubled, and like there's all these things like ransomware is not covered, and then I see articles like this, and I hear from the insurers, and they're like, actually, what we're charging is going down. And I think from this article, ransomware or malware events account for 51% of all claims. So I get really, really confused here on and maybe all of the above is happening, and it's just a really messy market. It yes. seems like insurance companies haven't quite figured out cyber insurance yet, which maybe accounts for all the confusion I'm having.
So cyber insurance is an immature market, even though it's a lot of the companies in them are super large and mature and slow and large enterprises, but the market itself is immature, and it suffers from a lot of problems, right? What the market, this article is Insurance Beasley responds to unsustainable rates in the cyber market as attacks surge. So it's talking about Beasley reducing, it's like stepping back or dialing down their cyber insurance offering in the US because the number of claims, the number of incidents that led them to have to actually pay the insurance coverage amounts was too high, and it was hurting their profitability. So, but essentially, what I'm hearing is they're going to be pickier about who they insure and how much they're charging in premiums for that, even if that means losing market share. Because that's the thing that I'm hearing. I'm hearing that, like in theory, if you listen to a lot of good folks that understand the theory behind how insurance works and how it has worked in other markets, in theory, insurance should be helping cybersecurity a lot and creating a financial incentive for companies to have better cybersecurity. Because in theory, like if you have a building, if you want to buy fire insurance, which you should and probably are even mandated to do depending on where that building is in the world, the insurance company is going to mandate that you apply a minimum level of controls. They're going to ensure that you have sprinklers, that you have fire extinguishers, that you have exit stairs with those thick doors that block heat and fire to make sure people can escape and you reduce the loss of life.
They have data on why you need all those things, right?
Exactly. And those things are more or less static, very differently from cyber security, where every month attackers are attacking a different thing in a different way. Buildings are buildings, and fires happen. They follow the laws of physics, unless it's arson. But even after it started, arson, the fire follows the laws of physics, and there are things you can do that always work. Yeah.
And if I can interject here, this is why my RSA talk is on the importance of breach transparency, is because transparency is the only way that you come up with these controls as, the controls you need to avoid losses, from building burning down or catching fire or something like that.
We have surprisingly little data on which controls actually work. And if I can recommend people to read, again, a foundational piece of information security wisdom is The Market for Silver Bullets. We should add a link on the show notes. It's a very interesting article written, I don't know how long ago, but a guy called Ian Cooey, I think his name is. And just amazing reading. I'm not going to try to summarize it here. But going back to how insurance is supposed to work. So they're going to require or at least measure what your security posture is. If your security posture is too bad, they won't even insure you, or they're going to charge like a very high premium. Premiums are measured like as a percentage of the coverage amount, right? So say, hey, if I have an incident, you're going to help me support X amount of losses in dollars, right? And then the insurance premium is the price you pay for the insurance, is a percentage of that value. In theory, the less secure you are, the worse security posture and practices you have, the bigger the percentage they're going to charge, right? And the more secure, the lower the percentage. So that is creating a financial incentive for you to be more secure, because that means you're going to be able to get either a larger coverage for the same amount, or pay less for the coverage you need, right? In practice, that does not happen for two reasons, I think. The first one is the insurance companies are as bad at measuring security posture as the PCRM teams are, because they're using the same techniques. They're using short, like really short self-assessment questionnaires, sometimes like dozens of questions, and I've seen TPCRM teams using hundreds of questions. Not that asking more questions is necessarily more thorough, but just an idea that they're trying to be simple. They're using interviews for, especially for large contracts, large enterprises, multi-million dollar premiums. Um, and they're using outside insecurity scans. So that's the parallels between how cyber insurance does actuarials or underwriting, as they call it, and the security assessments that we do into PCRM. Like they're doing exactly the same thing. They just have more math behind it, because they have to try to calculate the likelihood that you're going to have a breach to calculate the premiums, right? But it's as inaccurate as what we're doing into PCRM. That's a big part of the problem, because they don't have good enough data, because they don't have good ways of actually measuring the most important parts of how a company does security. Because self-assessment questionnaires and interviews are not useless, but they're super ineffective ways. They're much less effective than going into a building and measuring how wide are your fire escape stairs. Like, does every building have a sprinkler, and do they actually work? Like, that's very effective in measuring if those controls are actually in place, right? The other thing, so the first thing is they don't measure security posture well to reflect that in the premiums. The second thing is competition. Depending on the market segment, and I think that explains a little bit the confusion you get, because some market segments have a lot of competition, some market segments have less competition. I feel, for example, that the larger deals, if you're a Fortune 50 company that is doing a large cyber insurance deal, you're going to be just looking at the top insurers, because the other insurers don't even have the capital to cover you and cover your risk. So there's less competition, and maybe the process can be more thorough and can impose more things. But for most of the companies doing cyber insurance, what's determining the premium amount is competition between insurers. So regardless of what your risk is, if I price your risk correctly, I'm going to lose that deal as an insurer. If I'm targeting mid-market or small business, I either match my competitors' prices or I'm out of business. And so the price of insurance has become disconnected from the underwriting a little bit. I'm exaggerating, right? But like it's not as connected as it should be to create that financial incentive for companies to be more secure. And the competitive drive means that buyers are going to buy from the cheapest insurer, and they're going to buy from the insurer that creates less friction and require less things of them. So if I had two insurers that can insure my building for the same price, one of them requires me to install sprinklers and the other doesn't, hey, I'm going to save a few bucks and not install the freaking sprinklers.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening. And that's why I feel my perception is mostly cyber insurance is not helping drive security forward. It's not incentivizing companies to improve their security. It's a numbers game. If you have a lot of policies to distribute your risk, you're going to do well in cyber insurance. But that thing that we hoped, I myself hoped a couple of years back, if you look back on my X posts on LinkedIn posts, I was very optimistic about this. I'm not anymore. I think this is not working, and maybe this will improve in the future. But today, and I hear from insurance companies that one of the things that's driving up competition and breaking that link between premiums and actual risk is a lot of insurers that are using cheap money because they're venture backed. So startups entering cyber insurance, they don't have the same cost of capital that the larger insurance had and the caution that they had. They're more willing to buy market share. Anyway, I'm going to stop now and let you reflect on that.
Yeah, and it's using you know disasters, fire, as an example here, just had me thinking that there is it's not just insurance. Insurance doesn't get to make up a lot of those rules. Those are building codes. Those are commercial building codes that are put into place after just years of understanding what works, what doesn't work, what we need to do for building safety. And somebody goes in and the fire department, somebody goes in and audits that every now and then. We do tests of fire alarms. Large apartment buildings have to have these. And we've all seen the events, like when that doesn't happen, when that stuff gets skipped, it can be really, really tragic. And so it's just to say that it's not just on the insurance companies, right? Like they shouldn't be the only source of enforcement here. That we do need some regulations here as well, because the incentive is always going to be to do it faster, cheaper. And that's why one of the stories we covered this year was secure by design. And one of the reasons I had trouble really getting into that is the incentives aren't there. Like how are you going to convince people? Okay, you got a bunch of people to sign a thing. I think maybe even Fortinet was one of those companies, right? The secure by design. And so what? Everybody's just volunteering to spend tens of millions of dollars more and, create software and products slower and, slow down. Like, for what? Like, where's my incentive? The business side of it doesn't have the incentive. I don't see it happening. I think that initiative is dead on arrival.
So the conclusion we arrived is that you are an innovation-killing European communist that wants to regulate the crap out of cybersecurity. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But in all fairness,
I could be
one
called
of the
much
ways.
worse.
I'm exaggerating and misrepresenting the opposing view. They're valid positions to be held against excessive regulation, and I just trying to be facetious here. But the one of the ways in which you can handle this is creating a minimum baseline that is like required of companies, especially when human life is involved or when sensitive data is involved, which is the point of privacy regulation, for example, right? So that's one way by creating and then enforcing regulation that mandates a minimum, and it's super tricky to do, and it's always going to generate side effects and unintended consequences and imbalances that will have to evolve, but it's no control is perfect. That's not a reason. Like, legislating against murder doesn't prevent all murders. It's not a reason not to legislate against murder, right? So that's we have to try it and improve on it and create and iterate as societies. But that's one thing we could do. And the other is, how do you create financial incentives? And again, TPCRM is one of those financial incentives. If people that don't have proper security start losing deals, or they start getting worse security insurance, cyber insurance premiums, then yeah, that could be financial incentives that are driving people towards actually implementing security. But again, that's conditional on insurers and first parties being able to properly assess how secure companies are and not accept
Yeah.
things like SOC 2s, et cetera, that are not true signals of actual security, right? And again, that's the mission that we created Tenchi to achieve, to help companies be able to do that,
Yeah.
at least for their more critical vendors, to actually like open the hood and look inside and see what they are. And that we're not the only way you can do this. There are multiple ways you can do this, of course. But that's the thing. If I get one New Year's wish, it would be to shake people out of their stupor and say, what we're doing is not enough. You're accepting a lot of more risk than you realize. You're being fooled. You're overestimating how secure third parties are by a mile. It's not by an inch, unless you actually start, looking under the carpets and opening the hoods and really checking things out, because that's not what we're doing today as an industry. Like every company in every country I've been to, that's the thing that I find.
And
Cyber
again,
insurance is no different.
my RSA talk, like imagine other industries, like the building authority showing up to do an inspection, and you telling them it's none of your business if there's sprinklers or not, or if there's fire alarms or not. No, you can't come in. This is my building.
I
You're
won't
not allowed
let
to
you in
look.
to check. Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah,
Like that just wouldn't fly because we know historically stuff burns down, people die. There's enormous losses on many different levels, and we already know that in cyber. Like I think it has to be just a question of time before we get there. I don't see any other path. Especially with breaches aren't slowing down. Attackers are going more and more after revenue, after that bottom line, after causing losses on purpose to try and get you to pay some extortion, some ransom amount. So, yeah, companies are going to have to start being more transparent and saying, okay, look, yeah, we don't have MFA enabled for all employees. We said we did, but we don't. And they're going to have to actually do it. And it's going to take longer to get work done, and it's going to take longer to onboard contractors. It's going to take an extra day to do this or that. But, that's what tends to happen when these losses pile up. And, the industries, your insurance companies, the banks, whoever's paying these losses don't want to keep paying them. That's what happens.
yeah. I wanted to mention very briefly before we end on this. We had an amazing talk during Tenchi conference of Gabriel Bassett, and I forget the name of the underwriter that was there from Liberty Mutual Insurance. And they were kind enough to do a talk explaining a little bit. And they actually did, and you probably have the image, you can bring it up on YouTube during post, like the parallels between the same concepts they have in cyber insurance and what we do in TPCRM. So what we call a vendor in TPCRM, typically vendor risk management, is a policyholder. So the insurance company is evaluating the security of the policyholder or the prospective policyholder. A vendor assessment would be what they call underwriting. So they're trying to measure what your security posture is and how likely you are to have a security breach so they can price the premium. Vendor management, what you do afterwards, the way you handle or continuous monitoring, right? After you hired the first party, you should do that continuous follow-up of if they're keeping their security up to date, is what they call loss control. And I wanted to talk a little bit about loss control before we end here. And then when you have vendor instant response, is what they call a claim. Like the policyholder is going to make a claim saying you need to pay me because the thing I insured against has happened. So in the same way that when you have a car accident, you call your car insurance supplier. If it has a cyber insurance relevant incident, you call them and they help you handle it. So the other thing I want to say is that I see very few companies doing a good job at loss control in cyber insurance. They mostly do partnerships with vendors. Like you get a discount if you buy the security product. They're trying to incentivize you to buy security products by providing discounts. But they're not actually following up with the policyholder that much to make sure they are still keeping up with their security commitments. They rely a lot. Again, the parallels of TPCRM are amazing. We just talked last episode about if you have a contract, it will say if you have a security breach, like you can sue that third party to try to recoup your losses. And that's super rare in practice. Like we saw the Cognizant scenario with Clorox, for example, that we covered on the podcast this year. They have the same thing. Like if you said during underwriting that you had like patch management and you patched everything within 30 days, and then you have a breach and they are going to pay for it, but then they realized the breach involved exploiting a 90-year-old they owed bug that had a patch, and you didn't patch it, so you didn't follow the thing you said, they could just not pay because you violated the assumptions. But then again, in practice, it's something they rarely do because that's a company you'll never sell insurance to ever again. And anyone they care to talk to will say those guys are idiots and they didn't pay and I pay them my premium. But when time came, insurance companies are for good reason, very afraid of people thinking, I'm going to give them the premium, but then when time comes for me to use this insurance, they're not going to pay me, right? That's the horror story of buying insurance. So they really want to avoid this, even though we're starting to see more and more like people didn't have 2FA, so they don't pay.
Yeah.
When it's egregious, they will do it, but they will try to minimize that as well. But they have very little margins is the thing that really scared me when I looked into this market. The number of intermediaries, Adrian, that exists. So you buy insurance from a broker that gets a cut of the action.
Right.
And then they quote with multiple insurers, right? And then that insurer will have to have a reinsurer that they will share some of the risk with, and they will pay a certain percentage of the premium to that reinsurer to take care of some of the risk. But then there are brokers between insurers and reinsurers, because the insurer is going to farm out the price to multiple reinsurers. And then you have something called an MGA that can be in between brokers and insurance companies. So you have a broker, and then you have an MGA, and then you have an insurer, and then you have a reinsurance broker, and then you have a reinsurer. And sometimes you have multiple
middlemen all the way
reinsurers.
down.
Jesus Christ, they're intermediaries of the intermediaries. It's insane. And everyone gets a piece of the pie. Like each of those entities get 10 to 20% of the premium. So your actual insurance company might end up getting like 20% of the overall value that of the premium. And those premiums can be super low. Like we've seen cases in Latin America, we find it's between 1.5 and 2.5 and 5% of the coverage amount. But I've seen policies in the US for 0.5% of the coverage amount. So it's tiny margins already to begin with, right? And the risk is bigger than that. This is competition driving prices too low, right? And people don't go bankrupt immediately as it would happen if you were selling like a physical good, because there's a time lapse between you selling insurance and actually having to pay. Right. And sometimes you get lucky and not every company gets breached. So it's a really weird market. I hope it functions better because it's going to help security a ton.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see it evolve, and I think we'll probably find ourselves talking about cyber insurance more and more as it evolves, and we see how they're handling this environment. All right. Well, that's all we have time for this month. Alexandre, thank you so much for joining me today on our last episode of the year. Happy holidays to everybody joining, and hope you enjoyed these this year.
Happy holidays, everyone.
All right. If you liked what you heard and you're on a platform where you can like, subscribe, or leave a comment, please do so. We'd love to get your feedback. Stay safe and stay vigilant. We'll see you again next month, which is next year.